A young woman stood at the altar, not as herself, but as a replacement for her blind sister, a marriage arranged by their mother with a millionaire who had seen the truth all along. The crowd smiled, unaware of the silent tension between them. What was the price of pretending, and who was really being fooled? If this story touches something deep inside you, stay with us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts. It means more than you realize. The apartment on 32nd Avenue hadn't changed in years. The radiator still hissed in protest every few hours. The walls were still the pale yellow Ruth had painted after Avery left for college, and the chipped counter still held the dented kettle from when Olivia broke it during a fight. It was late morning, and the light through the dusty window drew pale lines across the kitchen floor. Avery stood barefoot, still in her paint-streaked tee and jeans, her hands covered in dried acrylic from a mock-up project she hadn't finished. The door slammed open behind her. Ruth didn't knock. Never had. She walked in with the urgency of someone chasing time, clutching a plastic garment bag in one hand and a small white box in the other. "Olivia's gone," she said. No hello, no breath between sentences. She left this morning, packed nothing but her handbag, took the car. The Hale wedding is in 3 hours. She held up the dress like it was proof of something noble. "You're wearing this." Avery didn't move. What she ran. "And I won't let this family be shamed. You're stepping in. Avery, you're her twin. No one will know the difference, not him, not the guests, not the press." Avery took a step back, voice low. "You want me to marry him? Just stand there. Do the vows. Sign the license. The deal will close in 48 hours. After that, you can disappear, like Olivia, outside." The street was filled with weekend noise delivery trucks, car horns, someone yelling about a parking space, but inside, all Avery heard was the hum inside her skull. She stared at the garment bag. Ruth dropped it on the couch and opened the box. 2 rings, one with a diamond the size of a drop of rain. "He's blind," Ruth said. Quieter now. "He won't know." Astoria to Manhattan felt like another country that day. Avery sat silently in the black town car Ruth called for her, the weight of the dress on her lap like a lead apron. She hadn't even showered. She used Olivia's perfumed jasmine and rose and tied her hair back the way Olivia always did for press events. The hotel loomed over Madison Avenue like a museum. The Carlyle, timeless and cold, with doormen who didn't blink when she stepped out. Avery passed the threshold of the grand lobby, holding her breath. Every step echoed. Guests turned briefly to look, but she kept moving. The main ballroom doors were open. Inside, flower arrangements the size of small trees stood by golden chairs arranged in perfect lines. Cameramen adjusted their tripods. The Hale family logo spun slowly on a screen above the altar. She approached the reception table. A man in a black suit, earpiece tucked tight, stopped her. "Miss, guests are being seated. Staff only through the side entrance." "I'm the bride," she whispered. Her throat was dry. "Olivia Collins." He hesitated. Then, with a practiced nod, he stepped aside and gestured toward the inner corridor. "My apologies. Miss Collins." She walked past him, her heels hitting the marble floor too hard, too fast. Her reflection flashed in the ornate mirrors. She looked like Olivia. Almost. But something inside her hadn't clicked into place. Avery followed the instructions. Ruth drilled into her turn left at the mezzanine. Enter through the side door of the ballroom. Avoid speaking too much. Smile lightly. Hold Maxwell's arm with the right hand. Do not tremble. She stood at the edge of the ballroom, heart pounding against her ribs like it wanted out. Maxwell Hale was already there. Dark suit, perfectly tailored, standing tall, though someone stood nearby to assist him. He held a cane, loosely, in his right hand. His head tilted slightly, as though listening to something no one else could hear. She walked toward him slowly. The murmurs in the room died down as she took her place beside him. He turned his head. "You're here early," he said, voice calm. Avery tried to match Olivia's cadence, just wanted to be ready. He smiled faintly. "I can always tell when Olivia's nervous. Her scent changes." She blinked, her body stiff. Maxwell turned his head slightly more toward her. Today, it's not Jasmine. It's Rose Forward. But that's not the part that's strange. Avery stayed silent, unsure whether to speak or run. He tilted his head closer. You placed your left hand on my sleeve instead of the right. Olivia always goes right. Someone in the audience laughed lightly at a joke that wasn't about them. The music started to swell at the back of the room. A string quartet began the prelude. Maxwell whispered one more thing. Who are you really? She didn't answer. The music filled the silence. He didn't move, but he didn't smile again either. The lounge on the third floor of the Carlyle was quieter than Avery expected. No music, just the hush of linen napkins being folded, champagne poured without fizz, and the soft murmur of legacy families exchanging glances over fine-boned china. She stood beside Maxwell near the long bay windows, fingers brushing the hem of her sleeve, pulse thudding like a second heartbeat in her ears. He hadn't said anything since the moment in the ballroom, but he hadn't let go of the question either. She'd lied quickly, something about a last-minute change in perfume due to a skin rash. He hadn't pressed. He only nodded once, slowly, and turned his head away. That silence, Avery realized, wasn't passive. It was deliberate. He was listening. A server brought over a tray with a pale teapot and 2 white porcelain cups, embossed with a silver H at the base. Maxwell turned his head slightly, gesturing toward her. Pour. Would you? He asked. From the left. Olivia knows I prefer it that way. Avery nodded before she could stop herself. She reached out, but instinctively placed the teacup to his right. The air shifted. Other side, he said gently. She corrected herself, the heat rising in her cheeks. No one else noticed. A conversation about hedge fund strategy resumed at the far end of the table. Someone laughed too loudly, but Maxwell's head remained still, his posture precise. He lifted the cup and took a slow sip. You're quieter today, he said without looking at her. Avery's throat dried. A lot on my mind. Olivia talks when she's nervous. You... Pause. There it was again, the steady picking, a part of her through silence, through scent, through habit. She looked away toward the balcony, pretending to be distracted by the view over Madison Avenue. She wasn't ready to meet his gaze, even if he couldn't meet hers. A man in a slim charcoal suit approached and leaned close. He was mid-50s, with a clipped beard and a tone of confidence that felt practiced. Mr. Hale, Miss Collins, he said, nodding politely. David Kane, communications director. Just a quick moment, if I may. Maxwell gestured subtly. Kane turned to Avery. Has Olivia pardoned? Have you signed the NDA package yet? Legal's asking before the joint statement is finalized. Avery blinked. NDA? She began, heart suddenly thudding again. We thought that would come after the ceremony. Kane frowned slightly. No, it's pre-merger. We need her signature today. Maxwell didn't react, but Avery could feel his stillness deepen. I'll get to that, she managed. Just waiting for my attorney. Kane gave a courteous smile that didn't touch his eyes. Of course. Let me know if you need assistance. He stepped back into the crowd. Avery exhaled slowly. Did you read yesterday? Maxwell asked suddenly. She turned to him. What in the library? I left a copy of Wolfe's essays on the corner table. Open. Her mind raced. She hadn't been in any library. She barely knew there was one. I didn't have time. He smiled faintly. Strange. Olivia never skips the library. She says the silence there is louder than any dinner party. She didn't answer. A drop of tea trembled at the rim of her cup. The event wrapped 30 minutes later. Maxwell excused himself politely, tapping his cane with a quiet rhythm as he moved toward the elevator. Avery followed, head lowered. Each step on the plush carpet felt like a reminder that she didn't belong here, that she was wearing a version of someone else's life, and he was peeling it off piece by piece. They reached the private elevator that led to the Hale family suites. A bellhop nodded as the doors opened. Inside, the silence was deeper. Maxwell stood to her left, hand resting lightly on the polished rail. "You didn't read yesterday," he said again. Not as a question this time. "No," she replied quietly. "But you're here anyway." She looked up. His head was tilted toward her, expression unreadable. "I'm trying to do the right thing," she said. "For whom?" The elevator rose. Avery didn't answer. When the doors slid open with a chime, Ruth Collins stood there, crisp blouse, pearl earrings, and a firm expression that said she hadn't come to negotiate. Beside her stood a man in a dark blue suit, carrying a folder. Ruth stepped forward. "We need a moment," she said, eyes on Avery. The man adjusted his glasses. "Miss Collins, I'm Douglas Wexler, family counsel. We'll need your signature on a few formalities before tomorrow." Avery froze. Maxwell didn't speak. The hallway stretched behind them, quiet, with soft lighting casting long shadows. Somewhere far off, a clock chimed the hour. She stepped out. Maxwell didn't follow, but his hand tightened once on the cane, as if he'd felt something shift. The suite on the 18th floor of the Carlyle smelled of old cedar and silence. It was the kind of silence that didn't come from emptiness, but from expectation, thick, patient, heavy. The curtains were drawn, muffling the city below. A long mahogany table ran through the center of the room, polished to the point it reflected the glow of the antique sconces. On it sat a set of documents bound in gold-threaded corners and a gleaming black fountain pen, centered like a relic. Avery stood near the table, her palms slick. She'd changed into the ivory sheath dress her mother brought earlier, hair swept up, the same earrings Olivia used for press interviews. From behind her, Ruth placed a firm hand on her lower back, guiding her forward like a piece on a chessboard. Across the table stood a man in his early 60s, salt and pepper hair cropped with intention, his tailored suit rigid with structure. Donald Frisk didn't look up from the folder as he flipped it open. "Miss Collins," he said. His voice had the rhythm of someone who read too many contracts aloud. "This is the Hale Collins Domestic Partnership, Pre-Agreement, and Merger Alignment. Addendum. It outlines asset neutrality, intellectual property distribution, and clauses pertaining to public representation. Have you reviewed it in full?" Avery's tongue pressed against the roof of her mouth. She glanced at Ruth. Her mother leaned close and whispered, "Just sign it. Anything else, we'll sort out later." Ruth's eyes didn't blink. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a final instruction. Avery turned her head toward Maxwell, who sat by the window. His cane rested horizontally across his knees. Though he couldn't see, his head tilted slightly, as if measuring the way everyone breathed. "I haven't read it," Avery said. Donald lifted his gaze, his brows almost rising. "It's customary that I'll sign," she added quickly. "I just need a minute." Donald nodded once and slid the folder toward her. The pen placed atop the front page. Avery sat down. The chair was too stiff, or maybe she just wasn't sitting right. The first page blurred slightly. There were too many names: Hale Holdings, Collins Family Trust, Olivia's signature line already printed at the bottom. She reached for the pen. It felt heavier than it looked. Ruth hovered just over her shoulder. "Don't overthink it, Avery." Avery looked up again. Maxwell hadn't moved, but something in his expression had changed. His mouth was still, but his fingers tapped once, lightly, on the head of the cane. The sound made her stomach tighten. She uncapped the pen, lowered it to the paper, and pressed down. Nothing. She tried again, still dry. The ink had run out, or never existed. Across the table, Donald reached for another pen, but Maxwell spoke first. "That one's Olivia's," he said quietly. "She used it to sketch on plane rides. I kept it." Avery froze, her hand still holding the useless pen. "It's out of ink," she said softly. Maxwell turned slightly toward the sound of her voice. She always forgot to refill it. Said the scratching noise helped her think. Avery forced a half smile, set the pen down, and accepted the ballpoint Donald now extended. Her signature came out too neat, too straight, unlike Olivia's loops. As she signed the last page, the door opened behind her. A woman entered carrying a small tray of tea, Earl Grey, lemon slices, sugar cubes precisely arranged. She wore a crisp white blouse and dark skirt, her posture practiced. But it was her eyes that paused Avery. She was young, mid-20s maybe, Filipina, with a name tag that read Maria. She set the tray down, offered a polite smile, but lingered a beat longer than expected. Her eyes flicked between Avery and Ruth, then landed on Maxwell. "Would you like it steeped longer today?" Mr. Hale Maria asked. Maxwell nodded once. "Just a little. She doesn't take it strong." Maria nodded again, noted. She turned to Avery. "Sugar." "No, thank you." Maria hesitated, then poured anyway. 1 cube, stirred twice. Her sleeve brushed the corner of the table. As she straightened, a folded cloth slipped from Maxwell's coat pocket. Maria picked it up gently, her fingers pausing over the embroidery, a single-stitched letter. Not O, an A. She handed it to Avery. "I think this is yours," she said softly. Ruth's smile thinned. Avery took the cloth, feeling the letter under her thumb. Her throat closed for a moment. She slid the handkerchief into her lap. As Maria cleared the tray, she leaned slightly forward and placed a folded note beneath the saucer closest to Avery. No one noticed. Ruth was busy checking the signature line. Donald was reciting next steps. Maxwell sat still again, listening. Avery unfolded the note in her palm when no one was looking. The handwriting was small and neat. "I know you're not Olivia, but I also know what it's like to take someone's place." She folded the note back. Outside the suite window, the city was glowing in the early evening haze, and for the first time since she'd stepped into Olivia's shoes, Avery felt someone saw through the leather. The night slipped quietly over Manhattan, folding the city's chaos into velvet shadows. Inside, the Carlisle, most of the 12th floor, had gone still. Distant laughter from the rooftop bar, the hum of elevators rising and falling, those were the only reminders the outside world still moved. Avery lay on the edge of the guest bed, fully dressed, unmoving. Maxwell had retreated to his suite hours earlier. Ruth had insisted on an early night. The wedding was in less than 20 hours. She was supposed to rest, hydrate, rehearse her expressions. Instead, at a little past midnight, she slipped out. She wore flat shoes this time, a shawl draped over her shoulders. The staff elevator hummed as she descended alone to the first floor. The carpet in the hallway muffled her steps as she turned left, then down a narrower corridor marked staff only. Maria's directions had been simple, past the linen closet, through the oak door that never quite latched. The library was colder than she expected. The scent of aged paper, polished wood, and time greeted her like a forgotten friend. 2 lamps burned faintly in opposite corners, barely enough to illuminate the rows of built-in shelves lining every wall. In the center sat a baby grand piano, its lid half open, a loose page of sheet music fluttering under the air vent. The title scrawled in pencil across the top, "River Flows in You." Notes half written. The ink faded near the end. Someone had stopped mid-melody. She stepped toward the shelves, fingertips grazing the spines. Leather-bound volumes, cracked dust jackets, embossed initials. Some had slips of paper between the pages. Others were sealed shut from disuse. Avery didn't know what she was looking for. Something Olivia might have touched. Something Maxwell might have left behind. Then she saw it. A thin blue book, the kind you'd walk past without a second glance. The spine read, "Each turn, a hand waits." She pulled it free and opened to the inside cover. There, written in the blue fountain ink, was a line, "Muitra hoa kuch, ngon kai ko vaugaisash, tiengyei kong trung Olivia." It took her a second to process it, not just because the sentence slipped between languages, but because it wasn't a note. It was a record, an observation. Someone had noticed her the way she touched things, the shoes she wore, the scent of tea on her breath. Someone had written it down, and the handwriting. It was neat but slanted, familiar. Maxwell. He'd known, maybe not immediately, but early. He had noticed, Not because she said the wrong name or hesitated, but because she moved differently. Her hand trembled slightly as she turned the next page. Nothing else. Blank sheets. Avery closed the book gently, her eyes misted. It wasn't fear she felt, or even guilt. It was something quieter, a kind of release. She'd spent every hour trying to be invisible inside Olivia's image, but someone had seen past it anyway. She walked to the piano. Her fingers hovered over the keys but didn't press. Instead, she touched the corner of the sheet music. The last measure was half finished, the pencil mark stopping mid-note. A story. Paused. Behind her. Footsteps. Not heavy. Measured. Leather soles. She turned quickly. David Kane. He didn't seem surprised to find her there. His blazer hung open, shirt sleeves slightly rolled, as though he'd left a conversation just to follow her. He raised the phone to his ear again, eyes still on her. "Yes," he said. "She's alone. In the library." He listened, then nodded. "Right after the signing tomorrow. We go ahead with the switch." Switch. Avery didn't move. Her back touched the piano's edge. "I'm handling it," Kane said quietly, then ended the call. His gaze met hers for a beat too long. "Didn't expect anyone here," she said, voice low. "Didn't expect you'd be the one reading that book." He answered. She stepped away from the piano, brushing past him gently. He didn't stop her. Outside, the hallway had cooled. The silence of the library behind her seemed to linger in her chest. She didn't run. She didn't confront him, not yet. There were too many questions with edges too sharp. But one thing was clear: she wasn't playing a role anymore. Not just Olivia's. She was becoming something else. Someone else. And someone had already started writing her part into the story. Morning in the Carlisle crept in quietly through layered drapes, casting faint bands of light across the edge of the bed and the antique vanity. Avery sat at the foot of the mattress, still in her silk robe, hair damp from the shower, the skin on her arms still smelling faintly of rose and cedar. It was supposed to be the day before the wedding, the calm, before the camera-ready storm. But her chest felt as if it were holding back a pressure too old to be named. She opened the closet to pick out the pressed cream blouse Ruth had chosen for the Hale brunch, but her fingers brushed a metal handle near the back, a low drawer she hadn't noticed before. It slid open with a creak. Inside, nestled in worn tissue paper, was an old shoebox. The moment her hand touched the lid, something in her shifted. She opened it slowly. On top lay a cracked iPhone screen, shattered like a web of frost. Its pink case dulled with time. Beneath it, a photo. She pulled it free. Montauk, summer of 2018. Avery and Olivia, barefoot in the sand, paint smudges on their jeans, arms around each other. Olivia was laughing real, unfiltered, and Avery's face showed something she barely recognized. Now, lightness. She turned the photo over, written in Olivia's handwriting, faded but deliberate. "If Mom chooses, I'll disappear." Avery's breath hitched. She stared at the words, fingers gripping the edge of the image so tightly the paper began to bend. The last time she and Olivia had spoken, really spoken, was nearly a year ago, after their 23rd birthday. Olivia had been withdrawn that night, half drunk on white wine and family fatigue. She didn't mention Maxwell. She didn't mention marriage. Only said, "You were always the one they wanted quiet." Now. Avery looked at the broken phone, pressed the power button. The screen flickered, then black, then flickered again. A single alert appeared. One unsent message in the drafts folder. "Don't let them make you disappear the way I did." The words clawed into her. She stared at the screen, mind racing. Olivia hadn't run in fear. She had chosen absence. Stepped aside not out of weakness, but to force Avery forward, or to finally give her sister the one thing Ruth never had a choice. The door behind her clicked. Avery snapped the phone off and tucked it under the tissue. She turned. Maria. The young server stood in the doorway, eyes wide, shoulders stiff. She wasn't carrying tea this time. No tray, no excuse, just urgency in her posture. You shouldn't leave things where others can find them, Maria said quietly, nodding toward the box. Avery's voice was low. How long have you known I'm not her? Maria stepped in, shut the door behind her. Since the first night, she said. Olivia never thanked me for anything. You always whisper it like you're not supposed to be here. Avery didn't deny it. Maria's eyes darted toward the hallway, then back. They don't just need a wife. Miss Collins, she said, they need someone they can mold, someone with a soft voice and a clean record, and a need to prove she belongs. Avery swallowed. Why tell me this now? Because they already got what they needed from Olivia. Maria answered, but she had a way of slipping through cracks. They think you'll stay in the room. The silence between them thickened. Maria walked over, pulled something from the pocket of her skirt, a folded page, creased from being carried too often. Corporate restructure proposal, she said. Vanessa Hale signed it last week. It lists you by name. Me, Avery frowned. Not Olivia. Avery Collins. They knew. Her fingers shook as she opened the page. Her name, typed. Official. Already part of the merger documents? She wasn't a mistake. She was a strategy. I'm just a stand-in, Avery said, more to herself than Maria. Maria shook her head. You're not a stand-in. You're the product. It landed like a slap. The suite phone rang. Avery stared at it. It rang 3 times before stopping. They'll want you downstairs, Maria said. The brunch is just the beginning. Tomorrow. It becomes permanent. Why are you helping me? Maria's expression softened. Just slightly. Because I was once the assistant who got upgraded to fiancé, she said, until I started asking questions. Avery gripped the edge of the vanity. I'm not going to the brunch, she said. Maria nodded. Then they'll come here. She turned to leave, pausing at the door. They think you're the easy one, she said. Let them find out otherwise. The door clicked shut. Avery stood there, the photo still in one hand, the printed document in the other. The air felt heavier than it had all morning. But so did the ground beneath her feet. She didn't move. Not yet, but she knew now she wasn't hiding anymore. The conference room on the 16th floor of Hale Manor was dressed like everything else in the building, subdued, pristine, designed to command, frosted glass on 3 walls, a view of Central Park behind the 4th, and a table that stretched so far, Avery wasn't sure where it ended. Everything smelled of polished mahogany and filtered air. It wasn't a room meant for feeling. It was a room meant for certainty. She sat at the far side, not quite at the table, but not entirely out of view, half shadow, half centerpiece. The label in front of her read, Mrs. Olivia Collins Hale, printed in serif, confident and cold. Across from her, Maxwell sat still. One hand rested lightly on the table's edge, the other cradling a white ceramic cup he hadn't sipped from. His cane leaned against the leg of his chair. If he was aware of the tension in the room, he gave no sign. He looked, as always, like someone listening to something just beneath the surface. Vanessa Hale presided at the head, flanked by legal advisors and Foster Tech's chief financial officer. Her voice cut through the murmurs with precision. We need more than a contract, she said. This partnership is about legacy, about image, about forward-facing integration. Someone nodded. Someone else took notes. We are selling a future of innovation and compassion, she continued. We need a face that feels credible, young, poised, appropriately inspiring, a wife who can speak without overspeaking, present, but not overwhelming. Avery sat straighter. I believe we have her, Vanessa said, eyes never directly on Avery. Let's move to final logistics. A man in navy pushed a manila folder forward. Contracts, timelines, rollouts. He flipped through as he spoke, rattling off clauses and delivery milestones. And then it happened. A paper slid loose. Not a document, glossy, thick, bent at the corners. It fluttered to the floor like a mistake no one was supposed to see. Avery leaned forward instinctively, before anyone else noticed. She reached for it, a photograph. Not of her and Maxwell, but Olivia, dressed in the same ivory rehearsal gown Avery had tried on days ago, standing beside a man who was definitely not Maxwell. His hand rested at her waist. His smile was casual, familiar, even affectionate. Avery turned the photo over. Nothing written. She slipped it under her planner. The voices continued around her, but the room tilted. Her pulse rang in her ears. Why would that photo be in a merger file? Why had no one else noticed? Her hands clenched under the table. Was Olivia ever meant to marry Maxwell, or had she been just another placeholder in a longer game? Maxwell shifted slightly, not toward her, but toward the room. "I'd like to hear from my wife," he said suddenly. All heads turned. Avery froze. Vanessa's lips parted, barely a protest, but she stayed quiet. "If she has something to say," Maxwell added, still facing straight ahead. "This might be the time." Silence. Avery could have said no, could have deflected, but she stood. "I'm not here because I'm perfect," she began, voice low, "or because I understand every decision made around this table. I studied design because it taught me to pay attention to how people live, what they hide, what they hope for." She paused. No one interrupted. "I've always believed that beauty doesn't come from symmetry. It comes from the places where things almost fall apart but don't. And I think that's what this partnership is about, how we hold things that don't fully match and still make them work." She sat back down. Her hands trembled, but only slightly. The room was silent for a beat too long. Then Vanessa smiled, thin and unreadable. "Thank you," she said. "That was poetic." Maxwell didn't move, but his hand tightened once on the edge of his chair. Avery looked away. The meeting dissolved minutes later, everyone filtering out in pairs or silence. She remained, waiting for her heart to steady. Then her phone, Olivia's phone, buzzed once on the table. A message from a number not saved. No name, no emoji, just one sentence. "You've said too much." The rooftop solarium atop Hale Manor was rarely used at night. It sat above the ballroom, wrapped in glass and framed with bronze, a room caught between sky and skyline. Avery had wandered up there to escape the tension curling through the hallways, the weight of eyes and unspoken contracts pressing from every side. Her heels echoed softly as she stepped inside. The air was cool, filled with the scent of orchids blooming quietly near the window ledges. She thought she was alone until she saw him. Robert Collins stood near the far corner, hands in his coat pockets, back turned. He looked older than she remembered, grayer, thinner, but still upright in the way that said he hadn't let time claim too much. Avery stopped short. For a moment, neither of them moved. He turned slowly. "Kon chua bao gyeonggi, sigep bo oj," she said, her voice unsteady, words slipping into Vietnamese before she caught herself. "I didn't think it would be you," Robert replied, switching gently back to English. "Not until I saw the guest list this morning. Then I hoped I was wrong." She crossed the room, stopped a few feet away. "You're here with Foster Tech?" she asked. He nodded. "Advisory board. I'm one of the names buried in footnotes." Avery folded her arms across her chest. "It's been 13 years, Dad." "I know." "Did you know Olivia ran?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he moved toward the wide glass pane facing Central Park. The trees below were just outlines, branches blurred by distance and city haze. Avery followed him, stood beside him, but not too close. "She left a note," she said. "She didn't just vanish." Robert sighed, low and tired. "Your mother always planned for both of you. Not fairly, just strategically." Avery turned to him. "That's not an answer." He looked at her then. The same eyes. Not cold, not warm, just worn. "There are things your mother does," he said slowly. "Not out of love, out of fear, of losing status, of waking up poor again. She was 17 when her father left. You didn't know her then, but I did." "She planned this." Avery's voice cracked. He reached into his coat, pulled out a folded document, and handed it to her. She unfolded it slowly. A share transfer agreement, drafted 3 weeks ago. Ruth Collins listed as the recipient of controlling interest in a new media arm of the Hale Foster Tech merger, pending marriage finalization. Avery's mouth went dry. She knew Olivia would leave. She whispered, "She had this ready. She knew Olivia wouldn't stay." He corrected, "She just didn't know if you'd come." The air between them changed. The rooftop was silent except for the hum of the building's generators far below. Avery's fingers tightened around the paper. "She sent me in," she said, like I was a chess piece. Robert didn't argue. "You knew." Avery accused. "And you didn't stop her." His shoulders lifted in a weary motion. "I didn't know it would be you standing here. I thought it would be another girl with Olivia's voice, Olivia's face. I didn't think she'd—" He stopped. What Avery pressed. Robert looked out again, his reflection faint against the darkened glass. "I didn't think Olivia would let herself be erased that easily," he said quietly. "But maybe that's what she chose. And maybe what you're choosing is to stop being erased." Avery couldn't speak. He turned to her, slowly, and pulled from his coat one more thing, a tiny, folded paper, her childhood handwriting. A list of things she wanted when she was 7. He handed it to her. "You wrote this after we left," he said. "Number 3, I wish people saw me before they saw Olivia." Avery stared at the list. She had forgotten it, but her fingers remembered how it folded. She looked up. "Who really needs this marriage?" "Dad." He said nothing. Her voice trembled. "Maxwell or Mom?" Robert's jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. He only stepped back, nodded once, and turned toward the door. She didn't follow. He didn't look back. The Riverside Convention Center buzzed with polished voices and the faint clicks of cameras being prepped. Everything smelled faintly of citrus cleaning agents and tension. Avery stood behind the stage curtain, her palms cold, a clipboard clutched loosely in one hand, not because she needed it, but because it gave her fingers something to hold. The dress didn't fit. It was close, but not enough. The shoulders slipped slightly, and the bodice puckered just under her collarbone. She'd pinned it in 2 places and adjusted the waist with a hidden clasp, but still, it wasn't hers. It was Olivia's. A dress meant for someone who had grown up expecting to be watched. Maria appeared at her side, clipboard of her own in hand, eyes scanning the crowd beyond the curtain. She leaned in close, voice low. "They picked this dress to see if you'd react like her," she whispered. "You haven't blinked yet. That's good." Avery wanted to laugh, or cry, or both. Instead, she straightened. Beyond the curtain, the crowd was already seated journalists from major networks, members of the Hale board, representatives from Foster Tech, and a handful of high-profile investors, on stage. The Hale Holdings logo gleamed against a navy backdrop, flanked by tall white orchids and a subtle digital ticker of the company's rising stock value. Maxwell stood beside her, composed, his cane resting lightly by his leg. He turned his face slightly toward her. "You okay?" She nodded, too quickly. "You don't have to smile if it feels false," he said. "Just stand still and breathe. People believe stillness more than charm." The stage manager gave the signal. They stepped out together. The room lit up flashbulbs, video lights, phones raised like digital confessions. Avery's heels echoed faintly on the polished floor. She kept her posture steady, arms relaxed, breathing anchored just beneath her ribs. Maxwell placed a hand lightly on her elbow. It looked natural, almost affectionate. The moderator began. Introductions. Applause. Then came the question. A journalist from The Atlantic raised his hand, half smiling. "Mr. Hale, you've been famously private for years. May I ask, what was it about your wife that made you step into the public eye?" Maxwell paused. Then, calmly, "She's not perfect." The room quieted. "And that's the thing I miss most when she's not around." Avery blinked. He didn't say her name, didn't qualify the statement, but it landed like a stone in still water. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate. Afterward, They walked off stage together into the corridor behind the convention hall. Avery let her breath go. "You did fine," Maxwell said, "but don't wear dresses that don't fit you again." She looked at him, startled. "You noticed." His expression didn't change. The sound of the zipper when you shift is different. Olivia never fidgeted in this fabric. She looked away. "It's not a reprimand," he added. "It's a request. I want to know who you are, not who you're mimicking." She didn't respond. Couldn't. They separated at the private elevators, he with a handler, she escorted by Maria. Inside the service hall, Maria pulled Avery aside, handing her a small flash drive. "What's this?" Avery asked. "Something you should have seen before they sent you here," Maria said. Back in the dressing suite, Avery plugged the drive into the vanity mirror's embedded screen. The footage flickered. A private meeting room, low light, a single camera angle. Vanessa Hale sat at a small round table, a glass of wine in hand. Olivia sat across from her, arms folded, not yet defensive, but alert. "If you're not ready," Vanessa said, voice composed, "someone else will take your place. That's not a threat. It's an understanding." Olivia didn't answer. Vanessa reached into her purse, pulled out a perfume bottle, turned it slowly in her fingers. "This scent," she said. "We'll use it for the replacement. It lingers in fabric, on skin, on memory, helps ease the transition." The clip cut off there. Avery sat still, hands resting on her lap. On the counter, the perfume bottle she'd used earlier still lay open. She reached for it, and then her phone buzzed. No caller ID. One message. "She's watching. Wear what's yours next time." The fluorescent lights hummed quietly above as Avery slipped away from the chaos of the press conference and descended to the hotel's basement level. The sterile hallways of Hale Manor's Riverside Convention Center felt colder here, away from the grand chandeliers and polished floors. It was a part of the estate. No one talked about a hidden room that housed the communications archive for Hale Holdings, filled with servers and monitors, all locked behind layers of digital security. With the discreet swipe of the access card Maria had slipped into her hand earlier, Avery passed through the secure door. The metallic click echoed in the confined space as she entered the dimly lit archive room. Rows of screens displayed static, timelines, and logs of recorded meetings, broadcasts, and internal discussions. The air smelled faintly of ozone and dust. Avery's fingers trembled slightly as she sat before the main terminal, the glow of the screen casting shadows across her face. Her eyes scanned the list of files, jumping from one meeting to another. She searched for anything related to Olivia or, more accurately, anything about her. Her heart pounded when she saw a file dated just 3 days before the wedding, tagged Vanessa Hale, Donald Frisk, confidential. But there was a problem. The file had been deleted. Not just deleted, but wiped with an obvious intent. The entry remained only as metadata date, participants, duration, no audio, no video. The kind of erasure that spoke volumes about what was hidden. Desperate. Avery accessed the recovery tools built into the system software that forensic IT specialists use to salvage data. She held her breath as progress bars crept forward slowly. Moments later, the screen flickered to life, and a grainy, broken audio clip began to play. Vanessa Hale's voice was clear, her tone calm but authoritative. "Make sure Maxwell never suspects. If she says anything, we can easily dismiss it because she's not Olivia." A brief pause. "Legally, we are covered, but the optics must be flawless. Remember, this replacement must be seamless. The public can't see the cracks." Donald Frisk's voice followed, low and measured. "Our contracts are airtight. If anyone digs too deep, we discredit them or accuse them of fabrication." Avery's stomach churned. This wasn't just a business transaction. It was a calculated trap. A legal and public relations fortress, built around a lie. Her fingers shook as she copied the clip onto a USB drive, her mind racing through the implications. If Vanessa and the legal team had planned this, then everything Avery had endured was premeditated. Every doubt, every lie, every moment she was made to feel invisible. Suddenly, the quiet click of the door opening broke through the tension. Avery froze. Maxwell appeared in the threshold, his white cane tapping lightly against the floor. His presence was steady, almost calming, but there was an edge in his voice when he spoke. "If you have to sneak around like this," he said deliberately, "it means either you're lying or you're seeking the truth." The room seemed to close in. Avery's breath hitched, caught between relief and fear. Was he condemning her actions or recognizing her courage? Maxwell's gaze, though unseeing, felt piercing. The question hung heavy in the air between them, unspoken but unavoidable. She didn't answer. The conference room at Hale Holdings was a polished space perched high above Midtown Manhattan. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a dizzying view of bustling streets far below, cars and pedestrians moving like ants on the concrete. Inside, the air was conditioned, crisp and cool, a stark contrast to the summer heat outside. Avery sat beside Maxwell, her hands folded neatly on the mahogany table, trying to steady the flutter of nerves that tightened her chest. Vanessa Hale, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, stood at the head of the table, her voice smooth and practiced. "Following the wedding, we need to reposition the narrative. Hale Holdings requires fresh imagery, a resilient couple, a wife who inspires not only our shareholders, but the public." Her words rippled through the room, met with polite nods and silent acknowledgments. Avery's pulse quickened. This was the moment she had dreaded and yet anticipated being called to speak. When the chairwoman finally turned to her, Avery rose, voice measured but earnest. "I won't speak of truths hidden or shadows cast," she began, choosing carefully. "Instead, I'll tell you about the first time I saw light, real light, through the window of my small attic room after graduation. A dream that seemed modest then to design a room, a space that was entirely mine." The room fell into a thoughtful silence. The members exchanged glances, some softer than others, their faces revealing more than their words. Then Gail Torrance, a sharp-eyed woman known for her discreet influence within the council, leaned forward. Her voice carried a subtle edge as she asked, "Where did you study Parsons School of Design?" Avery replied without hesitation. "And I learned one thing: authenticity never goes out of style." That simple declaration seemed to shift the atmosphere. Avery caught Gail's eyes as the woman reached for her notebook, scribbling something with quick, deliberate strokes. There was an unspoken acknowledgement, a quiet approval veiled beneath the surface politeness. Avery felt a flicker of hope amid the uncertainty. Her stance, once tentative, now grew steadier. The meeting drew to a close, chairs scraping lightly against the floor as members gathered their belongings. Before Avery could rise, Gail approached her quietly and slipped a business card into her hand. On the back, a brief note was penned in fine script. "If you need it, I know someone who can verify the truth." Avery's fingers closed around the card, tucking it safely into her purse. It was a lifeline disguised as a card. Just as she turned, Vanessa called her back with a poised smile. "We have guests arriving from Boston tonight. You'll need to smile more and talk less." The subtle command lingered in the air as Avery swallowed, understanding the layers of expectation wrapped around her every move. The windows caught the last rays of the sun, casting long shadows across the room, mirroring the doubt and determination battling within her. The warm glow of candlelight flickered against the tall windows of Orsay, the upscale French restaurant nestled on Lexington Avenue. The clinking of glasses and soft murmur of conversation filled the air, wrapping the evening in an elegant hush. Avery sat quietly among the Hale family, dressed carefully in a charcoal sheath dress, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass without drinking. Across the table, Alan Voss leaned back, a wry smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Alan was everything Avery had imagined. Olivia's first love might be polished, confident, and completely at ease in a room where power and privilege intertwined effortlessly. He greeted her with a knowing glance, as if the entire room was a stage and they were actors in a play neither fully understood. "Olivia," he said, voice rich with nostalgia, "we meet again." Maxwell's expression remained unreadable, eyes steady on Alan, who had clearly anticipated this moment. There was no surprise in the way Maxwell sat, no shift in posture, only a quiet patience. As the meal unfolded, Alan painted a picture of Olivia that felt distant yet intimate. He spoke of how she used to doodle his portrait on napkins, the quiet sketches that no one else had ever seen. He described her dreams of leaving New York, joining a volunteer medical team in Seattle, a life far from the glare of high society and corporate strategy. These stories were Avery's first glimpse into a woman she barely knew, a past that was never meant for her but now haunted her present. Avery listened in silence, feeling the weight of a borrowed life, a shadow cast long and unshakable. There was a bittersweet ache in realizing that the woman she replaced had hopes and fears she might never fully understand. The pain was quiet but persistent, a ghost settling in her chest. When the dinner concluded, Alan excused himself to the balcony, the crisp night air wrapped around him as he lit a cigarette, the glow briefly illuminating his sharp features. Avery hesitated, then followed. The city lights stretched below them, a sprawling canvas of possibility and secrets. Alan exhaled smoke slowly, then turned to her with a look that pierced the quiet. "You're not Olivia, are you?" The question hung heavy between them. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph, a candid shot of two women standing side by side at a student fashion show, smiles bright, eyes full of dreams. One was Olivia, the other was Avery. Alan's voice dropped to a low murmur. "I know who you really are, and I'm willing to keep your secret." His gaze sharpened, as if weighing her soul. "In exchange, I want a seat on the board at Hale Holdings." The weight of his proposal sank in deep. Avery's heart thundered. This was no casual reunion. This was a calculated move in a game far larger than she imagined. The morning sun was pale and diffused as Avery Collins stepped into the cold, granite steps of the New York County Courthouse at Foley Square. The air was thick with the scent of damp concrete and freshly brewed coffee from nearby carts. She gripped the USB drive tightly in her hand, the small device carrying the weight of truths no one wanted to see. It wasn't just a piece of evidence, it was a lifeline. Avery didn't come to sue or to provoke drama. She came to be heard, to speak for herself, not as Maxwell Hale's wife or a corporate pawn, but as Avery Collins, her own person. She felt the strange calm of someone who had reached a point beyond fear or doubt. The world would see her now in her own right. As she walked into the public information area, a familiar face appeared, Gail Torrance, the woman who had slipped her a card just days before, a secret lifeline amid the storm of deception. Gail's smile was tight but encouraging, and without a word, she nodded toward the waiting room where legal staff moved in muted urgency. The hallways were long, stretching like veins beneath the city, lined with cold marble and polished brass. Avery's footsteps echoed softly, yet every eye in the corridor seemed to follow her passage. She caught the briefest glimpses of curiosity and surprise, some whispers too quiet to catch, but their presence unmistakable. There, behind the heavy oak doors of the courtroom, the weight of authority awaited. Avery's heart beat steadily, her mind sharp and focused. Gone was the trembling girl who once doubted herself. Now, she was a woman ready to claim her voice. The court clerk called her name, Avery Collins. The room fell into a hush that pressed against her skin. No confusion, no questioning of her identity, no whisper of Mrs. Hale, just Avery. The name was hers alone, spoken clearly, firmly, without apology. She approached the witness stand with a steady gait, laying the USB on the table as the judge reviewed the materials briefly. The prosecutor confirmed the evidence's legitimacy and assured protection of her identity throughout the investigation. Avery signed the witness register, her hand unwavering, sealing her commitment to the truth. This was not just a legal step, it was a symbolic act of reclaiming herself. Avery was no longer a shadow living in someone else's world. She was stepping out, one deliberate move at a time. But even as she left the room, the courtroom's silence weighed heavy on her, signaling the gravity of what had begun. Outside, on the courthouse steps, Maria waited, her expression grave. She leaned in close, whispering, "Maxwell knows. He's waiting for you at Ranger's retreat. But there's more you don't know. Alan scheduled eye surgery, and he's using Maxwell's name to secure funding. A shiver ran through Avery. The game had shifted, and now it was more dangerous than ever. Ranger's Retreat sat quietly on the outskirts of Vermont, cloaked in a dense mist that blurred the edges of towering pines and smoothed the surface of a small, still lake. The old wooden house, a relic of the Hale family's three-generation legacy, looked both familiar and distant, like a memory folded into the landscape. Avery arrived to find the place wrapped in cold silence, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in her mind. Maxwell wasn't inside the main house when she stepped through the creaking door. Maria led her past the dimly lit hallways, their footsteps muffled by thick rugs, toward a modest medical wing at the back, a place Avery had never seen before. The air grew sterile and sharp, carrying the scent of antiseptics and latex. The tension settled in her chest like a stone. Behind the glass window of the surgery room, Maxwell sat alone, his profile calm but resigned. He was neither restrained nor restless, simply still, as if surrendering to the uncertain path ahead. His gaze was distant, empty in a way that unsettled Avery. The light caught the subtle twitch of his fingers, the faint rise and fall of his breath. She could feel the weight of everything unsaid between them. Alan Voss stood nearby, whispering instructions to a nurse before turning his head toward Avery. His expression was unreadable, but carried an edge of triumph, as though he held some secret victory. Avery's eyes narrowed, and the pieces began to fall into a darker pattern. Alan wasn't just a man manipulating the system for personal gain. He sought to cement himself into the very future Maxwell was about to see, a future where Maxwell's vision, literally and figuratively, would be clouded by the ghost of Olivia. Avery's heart pounded with a mix of anger and fear, the lines between ally and enemy blurring rapidly. Stepping away from the window, Avery caught Maria's attention. "Who authorized this surgery?" she asked, voice low but firm. Maria's lips pressed into a tight line. "Vanessa." She called it the final media pivot. The words hung between them like a warning. Avery's hand reached for the door to the operating room. She rapped gently on the thick glass. Maxwell's head turned slowly toward the sound, and his voice was barely more than a whisper, but it struck with clarity. "If it were you, don't let them turn you into someone else." Outside, the fog pressed closer, swallowing the retreat in silence. The surgery was underway. Avery stepped out from the sterile, cold environment of the medical wing and moved through the dimly lit wooden hallways of the Hale family's Vermont retreat. The soft crackling of the fireplace in the main house pulled her toward the living room where Vanessa Hale waited. The room was warm, dominated by flickering amber light, casting long shadows over the polished wood floor and leather chairs. Vanessa held a glass of deep red wine, swirling it slowly, her eyes fixed on the fire but distant, as if lost in thought. Vanessa's voice broke the silence. "Do you know why Olivia never quite fit?" she asked, never turning her gaze from the flames. Avery remained silent, uncertain whether to speak or listen. Vanessa's tone softened, but carried an edge of cold clarity. She resisted. "Yes," but she never had the courage to see it through. "You, on the other hand, you're different. You are the one the public will love, because they believe you're the last person who wants the spotlight." The words felt like a knife wrapped in velvet. Avery fought a rising storm of doubt and defiance inside her. She sat down slowly, eyes flickering between Vanessa's unreadable face and the shadows dancing on the walls. The weight of everything unsaid pressed down on her. Vanessa reached for a folder on the nearby table and slid it across to Avery. "This is the post-surgery media plan. Photos, talking points, scheduled appearances." Avery pushed the folder away, her voice steady but tinged with frustration. "You know I'm not Olivia, so why do you still keep me here?" Vanessa's sigh was long, almost weary. "Because Maxwell chose you. From day one." That simple sentence held the gravity of a verdict. It confirmed that Maxwell had never been deceived, not really. He had waited quietly, for Avery to find her voice and step into the role she was meant to play. But Vanessa had her own agenda, one Avery could now see more clearly. Olivia was expendable. What Vanessa needed was someone who could make the company believe in a transformation, a reinvention after scandal. Before Avery could respond, the heavy wooden door burst open. Maria rushed in, her face pale, eyes wide with panic. He's awake, and he's seen. The fire's flicker seemed to pause, the room holding its breath as Avery's gaze locked with Maria's, knowing the next moments would shatter everything again. The recovery room was wrapped in an almost sacred silence, the kind that fills the space when a long-awaited moment finally arrives. Maxwell's eyes fluttered open, slowly adjusting to the dim light that filtered through the window. It was the first time in nearly a decade he had seen the world, or at least glimpsed it again. But he did not cry, nor did he smile. Instead, his gaze was steady, unwavering, focused entirely on the figure standing by the door. Avery, "It's you," he said plainly, voice low but clear, each word weighted with meaning. "You're Avery, not Olivia, and I chose you from the moment you placed the teacup to the left." Avery's breath hitched, tears spilling freely now as she fell to her knees beside the bed. The words she had longed to hear, the quiet confirmation of her worth, landed softly but fully inside her. "I never tried to deceive you," she whispered, voice breaking. "I just didn't know if I was worthy of being seen." Maxwell reached out with deliberate slowness, taking her trembling hand in his. "Whether you stay with me or not, that choice belongs to you." The room seemed to hold its breath at the fragility of that moment, a choice laid bare, the quiet power of acceptance. But there was more beneath the surface, a truth that rippled through the stillness like an unexpected wave. Maxwell had allowed Alan to perform the surgery, not just to regain sight, but to ensure that whatever came after, he was certain about who he was looking at. Not a replica, not a shadow, but someone real, someone he could trust. Later, under the bright sunlight on the lawn of Ranger's Retreat, surrounded by family, board members, and a sea of reporters, Maxwell stood tall. The flashes of cameras felt different now, less intrusive, more like acknowledgement. He made a statement that stunned everyone present. He refused every public relations package, every attempt to spin their story into another version of the fairy tale. Instead, he handed control of the company's shares to a community fund dedicated to restoring vision, both literal and metaphorical, for those in need. A reporter's voice cut through the murmurs. "Can you confirm if this is Olivia Maxwell's eyes?" met the crowd with unwavering certainty. "No. She is the woman I love, and her name is Avery Collins." The words hung in the air, a powerful declaration that shattered illusions and rebuilt something far more authentic. A week later, Avery found herself back at the old attic apartment in Astoria. The space felt smaller than she remembered, but somehow calmer, softer. The morning light filtered gently through the thin curtains, casting long, familiar shadows on the faded walls. It was a place full of echoes of memories, of dreams, and of the woman she once was called. But now, Avery was here not to hide or to pretend. She was here to reclaim what was hers. The first thing she did was peel away the remnants of Olivia, old sketches taped haphazardly to the walls, photographs that weren't hers, even the faint scent of a perfume she never wore. She took down every trace, every token of that life she'd been cast into. It was painstaking, but necessary. She took up the paintbrush and began to paint over the old marks, the walls slowly turning from a faded gray to a bright, hopeful white. As she worked, her phone buzzed with a message from Maria. "The court investigation is underway. Alan has stepped down." Avery stared at the words, a quiet relief settling in her chest. The battle wasn't over, but the tides were shifting, not long after. Another message arrived, this time from her father. Robert. No words of explanation or apology, just a simple handwritten letter scanned and sent to her phone. The letter was brief, but its weight was unmistakable. For the first time, "I see you choosing yourself. and you've done what your mother never dared." She read the letter twice, feeling the gravity of those lines sink deep. There was no bitterness, no blame, just recognition, something she had craved for so long but never dared expect. The day stretched slowly, the sun beginning to set as Avery finished repainting the last corner of her room. The stark white walls no longer felt cold, they felt like a fresh start. She placed her brushes down, wiped the sweat from her brow, and allowed herself a rare moment of quiet pride. Later, as twilight deepened, there was a soft knock at the door. Avery opened it to find Maxwell standing there, holding a black umbrella against the light drizzle that had just begun. He was unaccompanied, unarmed by cameras or formal titles, just himself. "I heard you're opening your own design studio," he said quietly, stepping inside. His eyes held no expectations, only something softer, more honest. "If you ever need someone to carry your tea, remember how you placed it on the left." Avery smiled, a gentle curve that held no need for words or promises. No longer was there a script to follow, no roles to fit into. No one called her Olivia anymore. No one needed her to be anyone else but herself. She didn't say anything else. She simply stepped outside, head held high, and the rain began to fall, soft and light. The rain tapped softly against the window pane, a gentle reminder that time moves quietly, whether we're ready or not. Trust isn't about grand gestures. It's found in the small, unspoken moments that stretch between doubt and hope. Sometimes, the hardest battles are fought not in the light of day, but in the shadows we keep to ourselves. What if courage isn't a roar, but a whisper that lingers long after the noise fades and as the world keeps turning? We wonder, what does it truly mean to be seen,